Olande because Zimbabwe muhle kwazwai muri eZimbabwe tinomkamshira mchongo chedu chevechidiki uhlelo The Connection lelami Mike Hove. What's good muri eZimbabwe. You are tuned into The Connection, brought to you by Studio 7 Voice of America on Tuesday, the 29th of September. Muri Zimbabwe. I'm your host, Mike Hove. Welcome to The Connection, Studio 7's very own news program that targets tackling anything and everything youth-related. Unfortunately, Muri Zimbabwe, the program that you're tuned into right now is a pre-recorded program. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we've had to work from home. So what this means is you cannot join us live as per usual. You cannot call in. But nonetheless, tiripano, like so, pano pachirongwa chedu chevechidiki. So for those that are going to be watching the program on our Facebook page, you can write your comments and we'll be able to see them. Those that are going to be tuning in via radio, feel free to text us your input on +1 202 465 0318. Tonight on The Connection, we focus on COVID-19. Focus is going to be placed on how coronavirus, how COVID-19 has affected Zimbabwean youth. But the conversation is not going to be ending there. We're also going to be looking at an event that's happening here in the United States of America, here in my backyard. Tonight, the very first presidential U.S. election debate is going to be happening tonight between President Donald Trump, who is the Republican candidate, and of course, former Vice President Joe Biden, who is the Democratic candidate. So I speak to youth to hear their thoughts on the presidential candidates, to hear the importance of the youth vote in the upcoming elections, and more. But first up, health, with COVID-19. According to Johns Hopkins University, over 33,417,000 people worldwide have contracted COVID-19. As we speak, over 1 million people worldwide have died due to coronavirus, but some positive results. Over 23,193,000 people have recovered from COVID-19. So that is according to Johns Hopkins University. Now, according to the latest data released by the Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe currently has over 7,800 COVID cases, 228 people dead, and over 6,100 recovered. Now, the latest information released by the Ministry of Health, unfortunately, does not show the cumulative amount of PCR tests that have been conducted to date. However, it does highlight that 404 PCR tests were conducted yesterday. 4 cases tested positive. Of those 504, 6 people recovered and 1 person died in Bulawayo Gontutu. Now, when we're talking about active coronavirus cases, Zimbabwe currently has 1,476 active COVID cases. So just to recap one more time before we head over to our medical expert, Dr. Sizathinta Smemeza, who breaks down what this data means. Just a recap of the information released by the Ministry of Health. 7,800 COVID cases, 228 people dead, and over 6,100 people have recovered. So that's the latest information released by the Ministry of Health. So what does all this information mean? How is COVID-19 affecting the youth? And what can the youth help in Zimbabwe's fight against coronavirus? Let's head over to our medical expert, Dr. Sizathinta Smemeza, who breaks down what this data means and what youth can do in terms of helping in the fight against COVID-19.
I think the stats as they stand at the moment showing something that is positive, showing a lot of recoveries, very few deaths, and also very few new infections. So this means that statistically the curve is being flattened, because there are a lot of recoveries and also the number of new cases is also decreasing. But it still shows that COVID is still there, and we still need to be to protect ourselves from contracting it. So we just need to keep on keeping on.
So you've highlighted that COVID is still there. A lot of people are looking at this information and looking at this data, and they seem to be relaxing a lot more. What are you seeing in your surroundings with regards to people keeping up the same momentum with regards to wearing their masks, washing their hands, and so forth?
I think the reason why it's not spreading as much is because of those things that we've been doing. wearing masks, washing our hands. I think this year people have washed their hands more than their entire lives.
Right.
So those are the sort of things that are actually helping us. So we shouldn't stop them, because if we stop, then the disease might actually recur and start to spread much faster. So we should keep on doing those things so that we stop we curb the spread of the disease.
Right. Now, curbing the spread of the disease within the country is one thing, but with borders opening up soon, there's a whole different challenge. What do you think as a nation we need to prepare for with something like that?
Well, I think with the borders opening, and for us, we know that most of the people in Zimbabwe survive by cross-border trading and so forth. So I think the systems at the border controls are gonna have to be really strong. I haven't read in detail how it's gonna happen, but I know people are supposed to have valid COVID tests and so forth.
Right.
So we're gonna need to be much more vigilant, especially when it comes to cross-border trading and so forth. And also, like the same way COVID started, the second wave might start in Europe. The European comes to Africa, and
Right.
yeah, and the whole cycle starts again. So we just need to solidify the border control rules that are going to be used, and see what happens.
Before we delve into the whole idea of a second wave, I want us to go back to day one, when COVID broke out in Zimbabwe. The discussion around that time was Zimbabwe is now testing a lot. Medical practitioners were complaining about PPE and so forth. Now, fast forward to today. Has anything changed with regards to that discussion?
Well, testing has improved, as seen by the statistics, more than what was happening during that time. But also the question of PPE has always been a problem. There's always been a shortage. I'm sure there still is, because the rate of consumption is always high,
Right.
because of COVID. So the issue of shortage of PPE is something that we're gonna have to still keep on talking about, because as more people come back to work, as more people now get into hospitals, the rate of consumption of PPE is going to be high. So the shortage is always going to be there if we do not look out for it. In regards to testing, a lot of PCR tests are now being done, which is a good thing.
Does Zimbabwe still do RDT tests?
Sorry?
Does Zimbabwe still do RTT tests? Because when I look at the info, every single time they just put out PCR.
Some stations are still doing RDT, but as we have discussed a lot of times, RDT is not really sensitive. It's not really specific. So we'd rather do PCR, in my view. I think we should throw away all the RDT kits.
Ngatimbobata nyaya nerurimi rwamaita chipedza yedu uri kureda nditi tipeiwo maondereni pamusoro pezvenhamba yevanhu vabatwa nechirwere checoronavirus munyika. Tiri kuona kuti pane vanhu vazhinji vari kupora, uyezve kune vamwe vazhinji vari kubata chirwere ichi, asi vazhinji vacho vanenge vari kupora, uyezve vari kufa vanenge vari kuti shomei mazuva ano. Tipeiwo maondereni.
No, izvi tinoona kunge zvinhu zvakanaka chaizvo kuti vanhu vakawanda vari kupora, vari kurarama, vashoma vari kushayikawo nenyaya yechirwere ichi, nge tine urombo nazvo. Asi mastatistics aya ari kutiratidza kuti zvinhu zvinenge zviri nani munyika, kuti COVID haisi kunanopararira sezvataifungidzira kuti ichaita. Naizvozvo tinotenda chikuru. Saka tirikuda kungoti tirambe takashingirira nekuramba kuita zvatiri kutaura vhiki nevhiki, kupfeka mamaski edu, kugeza maoko, kuita self-isolate kana unge uchirwara, kuita social distancing, sezvo zviri izvo zvinhu zviri kutibetsera kuita kuti chirwere ichi chisapararire nenyika.
Pakatanga kutekeshera chirwere ichi gore rino kuZimbabwe, takanzwa nyanzvi munyaya dzeutano, vazhinji vachichema nenyaya yePPE, uyezve vachikurudzira hurumende yeZimbabwe kuti vaendere mberi vachishanda nemazvo mukutesta vanhu. Tichitarisa zviri kutekeshera kuri kuita chirwere cheCovid-19 mazuva ano muZimbabwe, nemaondero enyu mungati pane zvachinja here munyaya dzePPE uyezve kutestwa kwevanhu munyika?
Okay. Kutestwa kwevanhu kwakawedzera. Tiri kuzoona nemastatistics edu kuti vanhu vakawanda vakuitwa maPCR, inova iyo test yatinokurudzira. But also tichitaura nyaya yePPE, nyaya ichatongogara iripo, haisi kupera iko zvino, nekuti sezvo nyika yaakuvhurika, vanhu vaakufamba, vanhu vakawanda vaakuuya muzvipatara, zvichareva izvo kuti PPE kushandiswa kwachiitwa kunenge kwawedzerawo. Saka izvozvo zvichakonzeresa futi kuti PPE yedu itange kushomeka. Saka asi tinofanira kuramba tichingoita resupply, tichiramba tichitaura nazvazvo kuti PPE igare iripo. Asi nekuvhurika kuri kuita nyika iyi, the rate at which yatinenge tichishandisawo PPE yakawedzera. Saka naizvozvo tinoona kunge nyaya yePPE ichangoramba iripo, ichiramba kungoadreswa nguva nenguva.
Mabata nyaya yekuvhurwa kwenyika uyezve kuvhurwa kwemabhodha, munoziva kudzivirira kutekeshera kwechirwere cheCovid pasi pelockdown chinhu chimwe chete, asi pane chinhu chakatosiyana pamunozovhura mabhodha nekuvhura nyika. Nemaondero enyu mungati senyika taakufanira kugadzirira iyo yatinoti nechirungu second wave here yechirwere cheCovid-19?
I think senyika tinofanira kunge kutongogara takagadzirira second wave. Sekugadzira kwatinongoitawo zvirwere zvakawanda, ana kolera, anani, tinofanira kungogara takangogadzirira, such that kana zvakazoitika tinowanikwa tiri kusaidi riri nani. Second wave kuvhura kwemabhodha kunokwanisa kucontributa kuti second wave iitike, nenyaya yekuti vanhu vanenge vakufamba. Tinoziva kuti vanhu vakawanda muZimbabwe rarama yavo iri kuita zvekutamba mabhodha, vachitenga, vachitengesa. Saka izvozvo zvinokwanisa kuzobetsera kuti chirwere ichi chitekeshere maningi. Asi isu tiri kuti kana macontrols ekumabhodha akange ari strict, uyezve tichimhanyidzana nekuti vaccine iwanikwe nezvimwe zvakadaro, I think izvozvo zvinokwanisa kuzotibetsera in the long run kuti chirwere ichi second wave isaitike.
Ndachikumbira kuti mutsananguroka kune mhuri yeZimbabwe kuti patinenge tichigadzirira second wave, vanhu pachezvavo vanofanira kuita zvinhu zvakadii?
Vanhu pachezvavo tikufanira kukontinya tichiita zvatiri kuita. Nyaya ye-social distancing, nyaya yekugeza maoko, nyaya ye-self-isolation kana waonekwa uchirwara, uyezve nyaya yemakwarantini yatainge tichingoita iyi inofanira kugara iripo. Izvi zvinoderedza kuti chirwere chisatekeshere. Uyezve senyika tinofanira kugadzirira kuti tive tine mibhedha yakakwana muzvipatara, vashandi varimo vachishanda zvakanaka, uyezve tikwanisa kudisinfecta macommunities edu. Izvi zvinotibetsera kuti icho chirwere chacho pachezvacho chisakwanise kuwana nguva yekuchinja kuti chiadapte muenvironment yedu, so that second wave iyi haizotiparadze zvakare.
All right. Now, my last question to you, Dr. Simemeza, so that we wrap up the discussion here is, as young people, the youth of Zimbabwe, what role do you think we have to play in terms of helping in the fight against COVID-19 in Zimbabwe?
I think as the youth, we are the ones who are less vulnerable to this condition, and we are the ones who are also still have the energy. I think in a sense, we should be actively involved in the front lines, such that nasekuru nevabereki vedu vange vakazorora kumba, or working from home, and so forth, so that we don't lose some of our breadwinners. So I think as youth of Zimbabwe, we should take a proactive role in terms of spreading the message, in terms of implementing policies that have been set to prevent the spread of the virus. So in essence, I think the youth is the front line, in summary.
Dr. Tinotenda Simemeza, sithanda ukubonga udokotela Tinotenda Simemeza ngokungena kuhlelo lwethu labasakhulayo. So just a couple of things that Dr. Tinotenda Simemeza highlighted lapha kuhlelo. Simzwile esithi hayi uhulumende weZimbabwe, hayi uhulumende kuphela, kodwa wonke umuntu jikelele elizweni oyizalwane seZimbabwe esiphila kwele Zimbabwe kumele baqaphele, kumele baqhubekele phambili beyenza konke okusemandleni abo ukuvikela ukumemetheka komkhuhlane we-COVID-19. We hear Dr. Simemeza lapha ekhuthaza uzulu esithi qhubekelani phambili, ligeza izandla, qhubekelani phambili, lipractice lokho okuthiwa yi-social distancing, lingaminyani ngobunengi benu. He's also touching lapha on udaba lwe-PPE, impahla ezijonge ezikhangela ukuvikela kokumemetheka komkhuhlane we-COVID-19 ogoqela ama-gloves, ama-mask lokunye okutshiyeneyo. Uyakhuthaza uhulumende ukuthi hayi uhulumende njengoba the country is now slowly opening up, siyabona ukuthi abantu sebevunyelwa ukubhodabhoda elizweni, traveling intercity, ukuthi usuvunyelwa ukuya kwele Harare nxa umuntu ohlala koBulawayo sekuyavunyelwa manje. Uyasho udokotela Simemeza ukuthi hayi it is during this time whereby uhulumende sokumele azame ngamandla akhe wonke ukulungisisa udubo lokuswelakala kwempahla yokuvikela ukumemetheka komkhuhlane we-COVID-19. So ndiyo nyenga chibatona Dr. Tinotenda Simemeza, that's what Dr. Tinotenda Simemeza was touching on COVID-19. Now, if you're wondering what exactly is government doing, what has government done so far in the fight against coronavirus, last week, President Emmerson Mnangagwa delivered a speech whereby he was talking to members who are of different states who are part of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. One of the things that President Emmerson Mnangagwa highlights is what Zimbabwe is doing in terms of the fight against coronavirus. So let's head over to a clip of what President Emmerson Mnangagwa said, courtesy of the United Nations YouTube page. If you're looking to watch his full speech, head over to their YouTube page and you'll be able to watch it. Let's hear what President Emmerson Mnangagwa had to say about Zimbabwe's fight against COVID-19.
Your Excellencies, let me assure you that Zimbabwe continues to implement measures to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. Over and above instituting phased lockdowns following the World Health Organization guidelines, my government has also provided Zimbabwe dollars 18 billion, which is approximately $720 million, an economic stimulus package. Zimbabwe welcomes calls by the United Secretary General and the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, for the COVID-19 vaccine to be treated as a global public good with guaranteed fair distribution and mechanisms to ensure equal access.
So that was President Emmerson Mnangagwa delivering his speech at the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly last week. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, he delivered this speech in Zimbabwe. He delivered it virtually. It was a pre-recorded speech whereby he was touching on several different things. Amongst them was what Zimbabwe is currently doing in the fight against umkhuhlane coronavirus, in the fight against COVID-19. Now, we also reached out to people that focus on coronavirus in Zimbabwe to hear more about how COVID-19 is affecting the nation's youth, and of course their thoughts on some of the sentiments echoed by President Emmerson Mnangagwa. We reached out to Effie Dlela Ncube of the Citizens COVID-19 Monitoring Mechanism in Bulawayo. Let's hear what Effie had to say about how COVID-19 is affecting the nation's youth, and of course his thoughts on some of the things that were delivered by President Emmerson Mnangagwa that are COVID-19 related.
Inani labantu ababanjwe ngumkhuhlane lokhe lisiya liqansa lanxa lingasaqansi ngesibalo esiphezulu njengalokhuyana emuva qalisa, kodwa kakutsho ukuthi ingozi siphelile. Sesikubonile kusenzeka eEurope ukuthi liyaya lehle inani labantu ababanjwa ngumkhuhlane, libuye njalo liqanse ngokuphangisa esithi surge ngesingisi. Kanti kusesekhona njalo ingozi ye second wave ukuthi umkhuhlane onje uyabakhona wedlule ubuye ulandele futhi masinyane. Abantu kumele baziphathe ngendlela efaneleyo, balandele zonke izinto okuthiwa bazilandele, benze social distancing, bagqoka ama-mask, benze yonke into. Ngabasezikolo, ngabasemsebenzini benze lokho umthetho othi kakwenziwe ngokuba ingozi sesekhona.
Uhulumende kaMongameli Emmerson Mnangagwa usanda ukuvuma ukuthi umkhuhlane we-COVID-19 usuphazamisile impilo zabantu abaningi elizweni. Kodwa uthi uhulumende uyasebenza gadalala ukusiza uZulu, ikakhulukazi abaswelayo kulesi sikhathi ilizwe lilwisana ngalomkhuhlane. Ukubona njani lokho?
Umkhuhlane lo vele udilize impilo zabantu abaningi kakhulu, wabulala abantu. Into esizikhangela ngesingisi lokho kuthiwa yi-lives and livelihoods. Ngokuthi kuvalwe izinto, kuvalwe amafemu, kuvalwe izitolo, kuvalwe izikolo, kuvalwe imisebenzi, kwenze ukuthi abantu balahlekelwe yimpilo ngendlela enkulu kakhulu. Esikubone kusenzeka emhlabeni wonke jikelele ukuthi ohulumende bangenele ngendlela enkulu bancedisa abantu, kodwa kithi bayakhuluma nje ngomlomo, imali yakhona kayikabonakali isebenza ifika ebantwini ngendlela efaneleyo. Kanti kule corruption enengi eyenza ukuthi lanxa kungazanywa ukuthi imali ifinyelele ebantwini, nxa kungalwiswananga le corruption, imali ayisoze ifike ebantwini efanele kibo, izaphelela emaphokethini abantu bona laba abafanele bayidlulisele ebantwini.
Ubona ngani umkhuhlane we-COVID-19 usuphazamisile na impilo zabatsha elizweni?
Impilo zabatsha yizo eziphazamiseke kakhulu, ikakhulu abangamantombazana njengenjwayelo. Uzananzelela ukuthi kwabatsha kuphele kuvalwa izitolo, kuye kwaze kwaphela lokho esithi sanitary wear omama abakusebenzisa ukugcika ngesikhathi besesikhathini. Khona lokhuyana kubenze baphila impilo enzima kakhulu ngaphandle lelapha kade bekhona, behamba imango emide besiyathenga ezitolo ezikhatshana. Ukudula kwenze ukuthi izinto imali encane leyo iphele. Kanti abatsha baphazamiseke kakhulu njalo ngokumiswa kwemfundo. Phezu kwakho konke lokho, abanye balahlekelwe izimpilo.
Kuyini okumele kwenzakale ukusiza abatsha abalempilo eseziphazanyiswe ngalomkhuhlane njalo uhlelo lwe-lockdown?
Indlela okungasizwa ngayo abatsha zinengi kakhulu. Okumele uhulumende azilungise. Yokuqala, kasilungiseni udaba lwe-reproductive health. Luqakathekile kakhulu indlela okutholwa ngakhona lezi emacansini. Okwesibili ukuthi laba abatsha balahlekelwe imisebenzi bajekwe ngendlela eziza kwenza ukuthi bakwazi ukuphila kusiya phambili. Badinga ama-rent, badinga lokhu lalokhuyana. Bayadinga i-school fees, laba abakade befanele babhadale i-school fees akade bezibhadalela ikakhulu. Nxa imisebenzi ingasasetshenzwanga, kutsho khona ukuthi kabasela mali yokuthi baqhubeke ngesikolo. Uhulumende kumele abone ukuthi bale mali yokuqhubeka ngesikolo bafanele baqhubeke ngesikolo. Akade belamabhizinisi amancane, ama-small business, uhulumende kumele abone ukuthi uyabancedisa ngamaloni azabenza ukuthi babuyele njalo emabhizinisini yabo, babuyele njalo ekuzuzeni imali ngendlela kade bezuza ngayo.
Hayi, siyakuzwa efi egqiba ingxoxo yethu ngokuphosela amazwi akho okugcina.
Umkhuhlane we-COVID-19 usesekhona. Inani labantu ababanjwa umkhuhlane lingabonakala selisehla, labafayo besinani labo lisehla. Kodwa kakutsho ukuthi ingozi yalomkhuhlane kayikho. Njalo lanxa ngabe ujwayele ukuthi ubulale kakhulu kumbe ube severe kakhulu ebantwini abale pre-existing health conditions, lebantwini abadala, kodwa labatsha bayafa. Kumele ke baziphathe ngendlela efaneleyo, bangayi kuma-club, bangayi emabholeni labahlangana besiba banengi, bagqoka ama-mask, bageza izandla, benze konke lokho kuthiwa bakwenze, bangaze balahlekelwa impilo ngokungalandeli imithetho.
All right, that was Effie Dlela Ncube, a data analyst. He collects data. He's part of an organization that focuses on, analyzing COVID-19 figures in Zimbabwe and basically making people understand what exactly is happening in their surroundings. They're based in Gondutu, Zayachunga. Now, Effie highlights a couple of things, and three of the biggest takeaways from this interview is that, number one, he highlights how coronavirus is affecting Zimbabwean youth, and he mentions that there when there was the implementation of the national lockdown, there was an immediate shortage of sanitary ware because a lot of people could not now access these things from closed stores and so forth. He also highlights how studies were immediately interrupted. As we know, schools are now recently opening, but of course there's also other issues around the opening of schools, but now schools recently opened and students have spent majority of the year at home and they couldn't study properly. He also mentions that businesses were interrupted. The national lockdown immediately, as we know, Zimbabwe is a nation whereby a lot of people are self-employed, a lot of people work in the informal sector. And so when the national shutdown happened, a lot of people immediately were out of business. So those are some of the takeaways. Efihlela Ncube does highlight that he feels as though, in his opinion, what is being done by government is not enough. And he feels as though government needs to work a little harder. I've spoken to other people who have echoed similar sentiments where they said that, yes, they acknowledge the fact that there was a fund that was put aside. However, the monies that were received by the people were not enough to get by. The Connection, Mike Hove, as we speak, Muri Zimbabwe, we're talking coronavirus. Over 7,800 cases, 228 dead, and over 6,100 people have recovered. If you're looking to give us your input, please text us per WhatsApp per number +1 202 465 0318. Makatera chirongwa chedu chevechidiki, uhlelo The Connection.
COVID-19 uzamire beso nemumwe mire wanimita kupapa nemumwe kezaina wego nesipo kwe20 seconds kana kudarika ezai kuzaungana ezai kuzaenda paruzhinji nekuti COVID-19 chirwere chiriko garai muchisanitizer gara unekako kasanitizer nekuti kanouraya virus chinza masymptoms evirus kugombera isymptom kupisa muviri isymptom kutadza kupema zvakanaka hapana chakanaka pa masymptoms kana uchida rubatsiro fona pa2019 rubatsiro runouya pauri asi ngatizvichengetedzei hama.
Mr. Tirarira just signaled himself there, partnering up with Roots Africa, giving a message to the Zimbabweans. Hanzi gezai maoko kwa 20 seconds. Kana kudarika 2019 is the number to dial if you suspect that you might have COVID-19 symptoms, and you can call that number Kanaurum Zimbabwe, and you'll find more information. And of course, if they suspect, they'll tell you the closest center is here. This is where you can go to get tested for umkhuhlane where COVID-19. Now, whilst on the discussion of coronavirus, COVID-19 has affected people in different manners. Amongst them is that there has now been reports of an increased number of gender-based violence in Africa, in South Africa, we know it's predominant right now, and Zimbabwe. So we reached out to some of these players. Recently, we heard a lot of female-led organizations have released reports that highlight how much the spike has been in terms of gender-based violence in Zimbabwe.
The report actually showed that there was an increase in gender-based violence, which is linked to the COVID-19. For example, there was a 38.5% overall increase in gender-based violence between the periods of if you compare February to March 2020 and April to May 2020, this is, if you remember, tied to the hard lockdown that was part of the COVID-19 regulations. So with the hard lockdown, there were a lot of issues that happened. People lost their incomes, people were not going to work, they were forced to live in their homes with the perpetrators. There was a lot of tension because some of the reasons that were coming out, as to why gender-based violence was happening, and a lot of intimate partner violence. It was linked to issues of tensions that were arising as a result of not having sources of income. So you saw that from the report from Musasa's virtual help desk, there was also a sharp increase in terms of women and girls who were accessing sexual and gender-based violence services and information virtually, because now people were locked in the home and not being able to travel. So they now resorted to, your WhatsApp, just direct calls, texting as a form of trying to get access to services, which really shows that, during this lockdown, women were faced with these challenges and were facing gender-based violence and looked for alternatives to accessing services.
And what kind of help have they been able to receive so far? I remember once you were talking about a safe house that you guys as Roots were setting up.
Mm-hmm. I really want to applaud like women's organizations in Zimbabwe, the Msasas, the Adult Rep Clinic, Zwala, amongst others, and Roots as well. We really stepped up in terms after, because I think all the partners that I talked about, I may have missed some. We all got increased reportage in terms of gender-based violence and distress calls from women and girls who wanted support. And the support that we gave, like you alluded to, we had to start an impromptu shelter to support women and girls, because partners like Musasa, who have traditionally have had shelters to support women and girls, were overwhelmed, and they were also struggling with how do we then support. And now that there's COVID-19, they need to be measures put in place in terms of screening people who are coming in and whatnot. So there was that need to also have spaces where women could just come and get that support. So we started a shelter to support women and girls. We have also been providing, all the partners that I talked about and many others have been providing psychosocial support. You would get a call like 11 p.m. Somebody is saying, I'm in Norton and I'm in need of to be picked up because I don't have anywhere to go. I've been beaten up. So we would also provide transport services, because as partners that are working on gender-based violence, we also became, as part of the advocacy that we did, part of the essential services to have gender-based violence regarded as an essential service. So we are accredited to travel. So we would go and pick women and girls from places where they were facing violence to take them to safe spaces.
Now, you're a young person who's also a women's rights activist. What kind of impact has this had on Zimbabwean youth?
I think if we're talking about the impact of COVID-19, we have seen a lot of women and adolescents, I would say, failing to access essential sexual and reproductive health services, gender-based violence services. As you know, there's a period where there was not enough PPE in institutions like clinics and hospitals. And our organization actually works in hard to reach areas like farming and mining communities. So you would have, service providers turning away young people. If you don't have anything life-threatening, if you're not dying, if you're not bleeding, nobody's going to attend to you. So if you want a condom, you were not able to get it at an institution, or if you wanted, maybe counseling services or HIV critical services like HIV testing, you would not get that. You'd be turned away. So it really impacted. We have witnessed and recorded increased cases of teenage pregnancies, increased cases of sexual and gender-based violence that have been reported. So that has been the impact of COVID-19. But we've also gone a step further to sort of respond to such issues. Like you asked earlier, what have we been doing besides other services that I talked about? As an organization, we have been going to communities to do what we're calling mobile clinics. So we go with health personnel, we provide them with the necessary support, with necessary PPE. Then we go to communities where people are and where people need the services. Since they can't get the services from the clinics, then we're taking the services to the people. And we found that to be very helpful, not only for adolescents or the youth, but also for women and the under fives, because we're providing comprehensive services where, if a mother or a young woman comes with a child, they also get services.
Now, throughout this whole time, when the discussion of gender-based violence comes about, there's always a discussion around women empowerment. Where does women empowerment fit in such a circumstance, and how does it benefit people in terms of, eradicating gender-based violence?
I think research actually shows that where the political rights, the socio-economic rights of people are protected, by the constitution, by the government, there is always people thrive, women thrive. So the issues of economic empowerment then do come in. If you look at even the COVID-19 response, most women are surviving on, informal trading. So you find that the response was just, let's close all my markets, let's do this. There was no a gendered analysis to say, okay, so what's going to happen to women? What's going to happen to girls in terms of their economic empowerment? So economic empowerment then plays a very crucial role. I'm very happy that some of the partners who attended the launch of the report today, we're talking about the safe markets that have been launched in Epworth, where we are saying we know women and girls survive on these markets. How do we make them safer for women and girls that even during COVID-19, they still continue to, also participate in the economic development of the country and also be able to get some form of income and reduce household poverty and sort of also have an income. Like some of the issues, the reasons why there was a lot of tension and a lot of gender-based violence cases, it was also to do with money. So when women are economically empowered, we increase their life, choices and options. So you're not forced to stay in an abusive environment because you have some alternatives.
Alright, sulukandaba limzwile unkosazana Beatrice Savage ke ubesikhulumela ngempela ubechasisa lokho okwenzakalayo elizweni phansi kohlelo lwe-lockdown. Uyasho ngempela ukuthi ezindlini hanzi mudzimba umo munenge mune mhirishonga yakati one day iri kuitika. Now let's also reach out to other female rights advocates. Loisa Kapondo is another person that I reached out to hear her thoughts on gender-based violence under the national lockdown. Are the numbers increasing? And of course, what is triggering this spike of gender-based violence under the national lockdown? Let's hear what Lois had to say.
Some of the figures that we saw on reports shared by women organizations such as MSASA is that the number of women that experience gender-based violence was very high. The sad part of it is that usually when gender-based happens, children often suffer because now there were restrictions on movement. It's possible that children witnessed gender-based violence happening in their homes.
What do you think caused the increase in gender-based violence during the lockdown?
Stress, especially economic stress, induced stress as people lost their sources of income. There was a lot of emotional abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, especially on children. People in one roof, families, experienced a lot of gender-based violence during that time.
We've heard some people talk about women empowerment, saying that it could play a role in lowering gender-based violence cases in Zimbabwe. What is your take on that?
Not quite. I wouldn't say women empowerment lowers gender-based violence, mainly because violence can happen even to those women who are economically empowered. Yes, it is known that gender-based violence in most cases is driven by poverty, but it does not also mean that gender-based violence does not happen to women who are considered economically empowered. The advantage that an economically empowered woman might have is that they have an option of leaving in the face that they face gender-based violence. There is need for empowerment beyond economic empowerment to offer emotional support to women to know that they can actually walk away from a violent situation.
Now, Lois, in your opinion, do you think the Zimbabwean government is doing enough in ensuring that there is women empowerment in the country?
I think the government is trying. There are many projects for women that are targeted at women. For example, we've had bakeries that were rolled out across the country and the fisheries. There's a women's bank that gives out loans. And the Ministry of Women Affairs usually has projects for women. And the challenge may be the criteria used for women to be enrolled in such programs. But I think the government is doing something. It may not be enough. They may need more stakeholders to come in and to assist.
ngatimbobata inyaya ine rurimi rwamai. Tipeiwo maonero enyu pamusoro pezvokukwira kuri kuita nhamba yevanhu vane kodzero dziri kumbunyikidzwa mudzimba panguva iyo nyika iri pasi pechirongwa chelockdown.
Muono wangu maererano nemhirizhonga mudzimba yakawedzerwa panguva yelockdown muZimbabwe, manhamba acho akakurisa, anototyisa kutotaura. Takaona maripoti kubva kumaorganization anenge ana Musasa project vachitaura ivo kuti vakabatsira madzimai akawanda kudarika 10,000 vavakabatsira kuma-safe house kwavo vasangana nemhirizhonga muZimbabwe. Zvinhu zvinosiririsa because panowanzoitika mhirizhonga mudzimba, vana vanenge varipo vachiona. Zvinovawo pakuti vana vanga vachisanganidzirwawo mumhirizhonga yemudzimba. Vamwe vana vanga vachimbunyikidzwa nevanhu vavagere navo. Kunoripota changa chiri chinhu chinonetsa kune vamwe vanhu nekuti panga pane mutemo wekuti vanhu vasafambe-fambe. Saka nhamba dzakaripotwa dzinogona dzakatoderera kudarika nhamba yemhirizhonga yakatoitika mudzimba munguva yekorona.
So, Muri Zimbabwe, you just heard there from Uloisa Kapondo, a women's rights activist, a women's rights advocate. She was here, Pano Muno Muamerika Mukorera 2017, Pasi Pechirongwache Mandela Washington Fellowship. Now, if you're wondering what government is doing to empower women, once again, let's refer to the speech that President Emmerson Mnangagwa gave last week at the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Let's see what President Emmerson Mnangagwa said in his speech pertaining to women empowerment.
Your Excellencies, as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women on 1st October this year, I'm gratified to highlight that Zimbabwe has taken major steps in implementing the Beijing Declaration. These include the adoption of a gender-responsive constitution, establishment of the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, enactment of several pieces of legislation to outlaw all practices that infringe on the rights of women and girls, such as forced and child marriages and discrimination against women in inheritance matters. My government has also set up a women's bank to facilitate access to finance by women-owned businesses and projects.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa there, he was highlighting some of the strides that Zimbabwe has taken in the fight against gender-based violence that Zimbabwe has taken in the attempt to promote women in Zimbabwe. Now, unfortunately, due to time constraints, Muri Zimbabwe, we cannot give you some of our interviews in full. However, all the full interviews, for example, the interview that I had with Beatrice Savage about the report recently released by Musasa Project and others, will be available on our website at www.voazimbabwe.com. So if you go there, you'll be able to watch the whole video. So that's what is happening in Zimbabwe. Phansi pechirongwa che lockdown, phansi kuhlelo lwe-COVID-19 lockdown. Abantu bayaxabana ezindlini, abantu bayashayana ezindlini. Hanzi muZimbabwe mune mhirizhonga. There's been an increase in gender-based violence in Zimbabwe. Chirongwa The Connection, Mwineni Mike, Hove Muri Zimbabwe. If you're looking to give us your input, feel free to text us on WhatsApp. Our number is +1 202 465 0318.
Zikhipha lapho egama ngumawiza, I'm a kwaito artist aka Mr. Ngikhuluma isikhiwa ngevenecue. Guys, COVID-19 abayibiza ngecorona into ekhona. Phambili nge-social distancing, asigezeni izandla, always stay safe, stay home. Last now.
Easy, easy, easy machita, easy, easy.
Khuluma isikhiwa ngevenecue. Namuhla. Mawiza. Shout out to Mr. Mawiza there. We are showing ngempela ukuthi hi qhubekani. Social distancing continue. Gezani izandla continue. Musakanganwe. The number 2019 is the number to dial if you're looking to find out as to whether or not you have COVID. So if you suspect that you might have COVID, you might be showing COVID symptoms, 2019 is the number to dial. Chirongwa The Connection, Muyineni, Michael Hove. Now, earlier on, I touched on the fact that we're going to be discussing something big here happening here in the United States of America that is happening tonight. Tonight marks the first U.S. presidential election debate. We are going to see presidential candidates such as the current president and Republican nominee, Donald J. Trump. President Donald Trump is going to be up there on partaking in the debate. And of course, the Democratic candidate, former Vice President Joe Biden, he is going to be running for president in the 2020 elections. But before we delve deeper and speak to you to hear their thoughts on the importance of this debate and, of course, what they're expecting to hear from these presidential candidates, let's go to a VOA report done by Elizabeth Lee, whereby she talks about not just these two candidates, but she also talks about the fact that in America, there's more than two candidates. She talks about something called the third-party candidates.
In the contest for the White House, it is well known that President Donald Trump is running for re-election as a Republican, and running against him is former Vice President Joe Biden, a Democrat. What is less well known is that there are other people running for U.S. president on other party tickets.
The Peace and Freedom Party, the American Independent Party, but people really often don't know who these parties are.
People running for smaller parties are called third-party candidates. In the 2020 presidential race, two candidates from better-known third parties include Joe Jorgensen of the Libertarian Party and Howie Hawkins of the Green Party. Another third-party candidate who has made headlines is rapper Kanye West.
The most puzzling campaign, but the one that's gathered the most attention for his party, the birthday party. He's often talked about religion openly in his raps, and so he might appeal to more religiously conservative voters.
While third-party candidates are generally not considered serious contenders for the presidency, they can play a role in changing the dynamics of an election. One example is the 2016 race between Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton.
There's no question in 2016 that the third-party candidates hurt Hillary Clinton. All the exit polling showed that the votes that they were casting for third-party candidates were votes that otherwise would have gone to the Democrats.
2016 was a year in which there are a lot of Americans looking at Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton weren't thrilled with either choice, and they cast one of these protest votes.
But experts agree the 2020 election is different.
It's very clear now that the stakes are so high that either Joe Biden or Donald Trump will be the next president, and nobody wants to throw their vote away. And so we're seeing those third-party candidates polling at a lot lower numbers.
Clinton may have lost some votes to third-party candidates in 2016 because of how some Americans viewed her. But Biden does not face the same perception.
Hillary Clinton was seen as a darling of Wall Street and of high finance and these global trade deals that didn't give enough attention to the lives of working class people in blue-collar jobs across America. I think Joseph Biden is from a working class background, from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I think he can connect with that demographic even if he's associated with some of those trade deals.
The pandemic is also keeping third-party candidates from gaining traction in 2020 because it's tough for them to campaign in person. Third-party candidates also don't have the funds necessary to pay for big TV advertising campaigns.
The absence of third-party candidates that are strong this year should benefit the Democrats.
But as the outcome in 2016 proved, a presidential election can be quite unpredictable. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
Now to head over to the importance of the first presidential debate that's going to be happening tonight, we reached out to some of these youth. We reached out to Anasu Masakura, who is a young community leader based here in the United States. Let's hear what Anasu has to say.
Is important, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. without much of a big audience, right? At the debates, given the current state of things, right? But I think it's going to be very important, yes, and a good distinguisher between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Donald Trump has been saying Joe Biden is taking something to be as he is in the during the campaign. So it'll be good to see a contrast between the two candidates, but I don't think there's anything new that we're going to learn at tomorrow's debates, because at this point during the year, we already know where these candidates stand with regards to the topical issues that young people care about.
How important do you think the young vote and the young voice is in these upcoming elections?
Right. So, before this call, I was actually reading a poll that said, since the last presidential election, we've had more 18-year-olds of about, 15 million, right? So that's 15 million more voters in this election, right? And we've been seeing an uptick in youth engagement in politics over the past few years. So yeah, I think the young vote is going to be very, very decisive in this election, because the issues that they care about as young people are on the ballot as well.
Now, over the years, I've spoken to young people about governance. One thing they always like to hear or see is when young people are reflected within their governing bodies.
Right.
When we look at the age of both candidates, they all seem to be on the age, older side. Joe Biden himself being 77, actually way older than Donald Trump. How much do you think this plays in terms of connecting to young people? Do you think that's an important thing?
Yes and no. I do think you're right, that young people do want to see themselves reflected, in the governing structures, right, or in the representative bodies that we have here in the United States. But at the same time, I also think that they also care about the issues that the candidate is propounding, regardless of their age, right? So we saw that in Massachusetts with Ed Markey was able to garner the young vote because of his progressive policy stances, right? It was for universal health coverage, it was for slashing down college debt and things of that nature. So young people turned out to vote for him, and he won against Joe Kennedy. So I do think that yes, age is an important factor, but young people also realize that it is what it is. This is what they have, and between these two options, they have to choose someone who will benefit them.
But you touched on the fact that they only have two options, when in actual fact we've seen other party candidates coming into the limelight. And I found this really intriguing, because if we track back to 2016 when Donald Trump was running for president, one of the things that critics were saying actually propelled him was the Hollywood factor, the fact that people thought, this guy's not a politician, he's a rich guy coming in trying to help people. Now, come 2020, we have a black guy who's got the Hollywood effect. 2020, we've got Kanye West, he's a billionaire himself. Do you think that the celebrity factor on people like Kanye West is something that's going to play a role in this outcome of election?
I don't think so. Absolutely not. Kanye West isn't even on the ballot in some states, right? So I don't think that's going to be a significant factor, his being on the ballot in some states. And another polling that was done by Politico in August, I believe, showed that he only had 2% support among black voters, which is very, very low. So again, I don't think he's going to significantly shift the dynamics of this election. So no, I in short, I don't think so.
So speaking about the black voters themselves, this year is going to be a very monumental year for people of color, with Kamala Harris running as the vice presidential candidate to Joe Biden. How much impact do you think this has had in terms of how young people are looking at these elections, especially young people of color?
That's very interesting. I've actually been working as an organizer here in Milwaukee, to turn out the vote in November. And my conversations with young people of color have shown that there are two camps with regards to Kamala Harris's, vice presidency, right? There are those who say, well, it doesn't really matter, right? It's tokenism. Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor in California leaves a lot to be desired. So this doesn't really do much to address the issues that young people of color face in the United States. Then there is a camp that sees Kamala Harris's nomination as historic, right? And as we saw after her nomination by Joe Biden, we saw an uptick in engagement, in donations to the Democratic Party, which may reflect the enthusiasm of people. I mean, particularly young people with that nomination.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we wrap up our conversation, Anesu, you and I are both young Zimbabweans that are based in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And our audience is predominantly back in Zimbabwe, but I'm also curious to see what's going through the minds of young Americans and, of course, what they can learn from how things are coming up. With the upcoming elections, what do you think young Zimbabweans should look at and learn from how things are done in America?
Right. I mean, what I've always admired about young Americans is the way they organize themselves, right? They aren't afraid of speaking out for the causes that they care about. And the fact that they're turning out to vote right now in November shows that they really care about politics and the policies that these candidates propose. We've seen some of them actually running for office, and a good example of that is AOC, right? Who's been a beacon of hope for young progressives. So that's what I really admire about young Americans, and I hope that young Zimbabweans learn something from that. Now I know there are a lot of issues in Zimbabwe that make them worry about participating in the political process, but I do think that they do care about what happens in their politics, and maybe they may be looking for that leader who will be able to say whatever happens, we'll keep on pressing on until this government is out of power.
All right, young Zimbabwean based in the United States of America. He's a community leader himself. Anesu Masakura, shout out to Anesu for joining us. So for those that are looking to watch the first US presidential debate of 2020, we are going to be carrying a lot of the streams and a lot of the stuff on our Facebook pages, VOA Shona, VOA Ndebele Nepal, VOA Studio 7. Stay tuned to our website, www.voazimbabwe, and you'll be able to catch it. Now, as we wrap up our conversation, as we wrap up our program today, let's wrap it up on a good note. For those that have been paying attention to the internet, there's been a frenzy going on called the Jerusalem Challenge. Muimba Mkurumbira, Odumayo Ngempela, DJ. He's a DJ, he's a producer. Master KG. His song has officially become the most streamed song on Shazam, the most searched for song on Shazam worldwide. Now, with that song being the most searched for song in worldwide, came about the Jerusalem Challenge. Now, this Jerusalem Challenge has taken the world by storm. Even for Zimbabwe, people have been doing it. We saw per Twitter, and dark culture were also trending. Now, the Zimbabwe Wildlife Parks also joined in on the fun. So I figured let's wrap up this conversation. Let's wrap up today's program on a very happy note to see what's happening. And of course, it turns out that doing stuff on the internet actually helps Zimbabwe in terms of tourism. So let's go to a report done by Columbus Mavunga.
Zimbabwe Wildlife Rescue Center, Wild is Life, this month joined in the Jerusalem Dance Challenge, a South African internet craze that is sweeping across the continent. The song Jerusalem by South African DJ and record producer Master KG and vocalist Nomgebo went viral during the COVID-19 lockdown. Dancers, both professional and amateur, began posting their performances to the song online, including with some wildlife.
For us particularly, just spreading awareness of animals and the sentience of animals and the importance of animals for our national heritage, basically, for our children and for our country.
Dankwet says she was shocked and excited when their dance video went viral, gaining thousands of views. She hopes it will help support Zimbabwe's wildlife tourism. South African tourist Philippa Meek says she decided to visit the Wild is Life Center after seeing the video online.
With all the animals and the baby elephants, they were so cute, and seeing the giraffe in the video and all the spirit was just absolutely fantastic. And I thought it was one of the best Jerusalem videos that is out there. And it really encouraged me, because I'm from South Africa, to come here and actually see it for myself.
Like much of Africa, Zimbabwe's tourism industry has been suffering from the pandemic since March. But even before COVID-19, Zimbabwe struggled to attract tourists.
For us to be successful, we need a sound domestic tourism product. Then we can go to the region and effectively send it out to the international market and increase our arrivals, thereby increasing our contribution to the GDP, which is currently at 8%.
Zimbabwe hopes its rich wildlife can grow tourism and the troubled economy. Groups like Wild is Life certainly help, and more viral videos of cute wildlife would not hurt either. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare.
Same time, same place. My time is up here, Muri Zimbabwe. Let's meet same time, same place next week. I go by the name of Mike Hove, Muri Zimbabwe. Bye-bye!